Rain pressed against the glass that night, soft and relentless, like the world was crying with her. Emily stood near the window, her breath fogging the pain as Jason's voice echoed in her head, cold, final, unforgettable. "Delete my number. Don't call again." He had said it like it meant nothing, like she meant nothing. His words fell between them like a wall, sharp enough to slice through every promise they once whispered under softer skies. She wanted to speak, to ask him why, but his back was already turned. The sound of his footsteps faded into the storm outside, and with it, the last bit of warmth in her chest. For a long time, she didn't move. The phone in her hand felt heavy, useless, like a memory she wasn't ready to let go of. She thought about the nights he used to call just to hear her laugh, the mornings he'd send messages saying, "Don't forget breakfast." Now all that was gone, replaced by silence that seemed to stretch endlessly through her apartment. The smell of his cologne still lingered on the couch. The faint outline of his coffee cup still sat by the sink. She tried to erase him, but love refused to be deleted like a number from a phone. As rain poured harder, Emily whispered to herself, maybe he'll call back. But deep down, she knew he wouldn't, and yet a small spark of hope flickered in her heart, quiet but alive, daring to believe that goodbyes could one day find their way home again. Weeks turned into months, but the emptiness stayed. Emily learned how to smile without meaning it, how to speak without feeling, how to breathe without truly living. Every corner of her apartment carried his ghost, the shirt he left on her chair, the half-read book on her nightstand, the faint trace of his cologne that refused to fade. She tried to move on, but grief had built a home inside her. At night she'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what went wrong. Was she not enough, or had he already replaced her before he walked away? The questions burned, but no answers came. One morning, while getting ready for work, a wave of dizziness hit her. She brushed it off as stress, but when it kept returning, fear began to bloom. A week later, she stood in the bathroom, holding a small white stick that would change her world forever. 2 pink lines. Her breath caught in her throat. For a long time she couldn't move. Tears welled in her eyes, not from heartbreak this time, but from disbelief. Jason's words echoed again, "Delete my number." She sank onto the floor, her shaking hands over her stomach. Life was growing inside her, a reminder of love she wasn't allowed to keep. That night she didn't cry for him. She cried for the tiny heartbeat she hadn't yet heard, for the child who would never know his father's touch. And between those tears a promise formed. She would raise this child with strength. She would love enough for both of them. Days turned into a quiet rhythm of survival. Emily woke early, dressed carefully to hide her exhaustion, and carried her secret like a fragile flame. No one at work knew. To them, she was the same dependable, quiet woman who smiled politely and finished every task. But behind that smile, her mind was a storm. Every moment was a battle between fear and hope. Each morning, sickness reminded her that life was changing in ways she could not stop. When she heard the tiny heartbeat for the first time in the doctor's office, it felt like the sound of forgiveness. A soft, steady rhythm that whispered, "You're not alone anymore." She began talking to the baby when she was home, telling stories, making promises she wasn't sure she could keep. "I'll protect you," she whispered one night, her hand resting on her growing stomach. No matter what. She didn't know how, but she meant it. Her friends noticed the glow in her eyes returning, but they didn't know the reason. She wasn't ready to tell them. Sometimes she still thought about Jason, not with anger, but with quiet sadness. She wondered if he ever thought about her, if he'd feel something, anything, if he knew the truth. But she refused to reach out. The man who told her to erase him had already chosen his silence. She would not beg for what should have been freely given. Instead, she found comfort in the tiny movements inside her. Each flutter reminded her that love could grow, even after being broken. The months passed slowly, each one marking a new chapter in her transformation. Emily no longer lived for yesterday's memories, but for the heartbeat inside her that grew stronger with every passing day. She worked long hours, saving every penny, and on weekends, she painted the small second room in soft yellow, turning it into a nursery. There were nights she would sit in that room, resting her back against the wall, whispering to the baby about dreams she once had for herself. Now every dream began and ended with this tiny life. When she felt the first kick, she broke into tears, laughing through them as if the universe had spoken directly to her heart. It was the most beautiful reminder that she was not alone anymore. One evening, as she walked home from work, she saw a car that looked like Jason's parked near her street. Her heart froze for a second before reason returned. It wasn't him. He was probably halfway across the world, chasing another deal, another empire. Still, her chest ached at the thought of him never knowing what he'd left behind. But the ache no longer felt like weakness. It felt like proof she had survived what was meant to destroy her. On the night her water broke, she was alone, terrified but determined. Hours later, as she held her baby boy in her trembling arms, everything around her disappeared. The pain, the past, the fear, all replaced by something purer than she'd ever known. Love, fierce, unbreakable love. And in that moment, she silently promised her son that no matter who walked away, she never would. Years drifted by, yet Emily remembered that night, as if it was stitched into her soul. Her son, Liam, grew into a lively little boy with curious eyes and a laugh that filled every corner of their small home. He had Jason's smile, something she tried not to think about too often, but it was impossible to ignore. Every time he looked at her and said, "I love you, Mommy," her heart swelled and broke all at once. She built a life for them piece by piece, working double shifts, attending parent meetings, and celebrating birthdays with simple cakes and whispered prayers of gratitude. Each day was hard, but each night ended with peace. Her strength had become her quiet armor. Still, some evenings, when Liam was asleep, Emily would find herself standing by the window, watching the same rainfall that once marked her heartbreak. She no longer waited for Jason, but she sometimes wondered what he became. Did he ever regret the words he threw at her like stones? Did he ever feel the emptiness of the silence he demanded? She would shake her head, brush the thought away, and focus on the laughter echoing from the next room. But fate has its own strange timing. One morning, while taking Liam to school, she saw a familiar face across the street. Her heart stuttered. Jason. Older, sharper, dressed in a dark coat, standing beside a sleek black car. Their eyes met for a split second before he turned away. She froze, breath caught between disbelief and memory, realizing that some stories do not end when we think they do. They wait. That night, Emily could not sleep. The image of Jason standing by that car haunted her, refusing to fade. It had been 4 long years since he vanished from her life, and now he was suddenly there, so close, yet impossibly distant. Her heart raced with confusion. What did he want? Why now? She tried to convince herself it didn't matter. But a part of her, the part that still remembered how it felt to be loved by him, would not quiet down. The next evening, after putting Liam to bed, she heard the low hum of an engine outside. Curiosity tugged at her until she pulled the curtain aside. There it was, the same black car parked under the streetlight, and leaning against it, just like a ghost from the past, was Jason. His posture was different this time, his head lowered, his eyes fixed on her house like he was waiting for courage to knock. Emily's breath trembled. She stepped back, unsure whether to open the door or hide behind it. Jason didn't move closer. He stood there for a long time, hands in his pockets, the cold night air turning his breath into small clouds. The silence between them was heavy, filled with all the words never spoken. Finally, the car's headlights blinked on, and as he turned to leave, Emily whispered through the glass, "You're too late." But deep down, she knew fate was not done with them. Because some stories, no matter how broken, find their way back to where they began.